Parental alienation syndrome. It can be a powerful influence on family life and a child's upbringing. Yet are many of us aware of what it really entails, and does the family law system in the UK even recognise it? In 1985, a psychologist who had taken a keen interest in the effects of broken families on children coined the phrase parental alienation syndrome. Richard Gardner had begun to notice an increase in the number of children from broken families who turned against their dads in particular for no apparent reason. The alienated parent, as he defined it, was the father in at least 90% of the cases, where the broken family ends up with just one parent. He also stated that the sexual revolution of the 1960s brought with it greater involvement of parenting by the father. Now that women were getting better deserved career opportunities, fathers were becoming more of a hands-on parent than just a provider. Perhaps this has created more expectations of modern fathers to have a greater involvement in their children's upbringing, so that if their families do split up, it's all the more painful should they get cut out of the picture.
Well, regardless of whether improvements can be made to the family court system or not, maybe we should be looking at the bigger picture. Maybe we should be looking at just exactly what causes estrangement between a child and its parents.
Dr. Ludwig Lowenstein is the president of the International Council for Psychologists. I went to see him to find out more about parental alienation.
Parental alienation syndrome is a tragic situation which occurs when there is implacable hostility between the parents. Usually the implacable hostility is very powerful with the custodial parent, who is usually the mother, but it could be the father. When that parent, the custodial parent, as I said, usually the mother, fails to appreciate the importance of involving the father in the rearing of the children, and in many cases wishes to eliminate him altogether from being part of the rearing process of their children. Essentially, the implacable hostility of the custodial parent is mainly responsible for the alienation process. The courts don't help at all on the whole, because if a child says to a social worker or whoever is interviewing him that they don't wish to see the absent parent, whether it's a father or mother, the court will generally say, well, if the child doesn't want to see that parent, then that child shouldn't be forced to see that parent. What the court does not recognize is the fact that the child has probably been alienated against the parent due to the hatred of the custodial parent towards the absent parent. And that is not the child speaking that he doesn't want to see the absent father, but rather the custodial parent filled with hatred or hostility towards the absent parent. The worst situation that I've encountered in this hostility is where the child or children never see the parent, and the parent who's absent. And this is undoubtedly due to the fact that the court fails to implement action against the custodial parent who emotionally abuses, and I call it emotional abuses, the child to prevent that child from having access to the parent. I'm afraid that the system in the courts, in the medical profession in many cases, fails to acknowledge the damage that is being done currently when parents separate and the courts are unable to involve both parents in the children being reared. This, of course, could be prevented if both parents considered, first of all, their children's welfare and not their own acrimony towards one another. My own experiences have been to spend much time with fathers, but also with mothers who have been alienated, and frequently it is forgotten that mothers too suffer from the alienation process when father has got custody of the child or children. My book on parental alienation points this out very clearly. Frequently that child has had a very good relationship with the absent parent, whether it's the mother or the father, and in many ways wishes to continue that relationship, but because of the fear of antagonizing or the custodial parent will refuse to see the absent parent or claim that he doesn't want to see that parent. The best way of preventing parental alienation is for both parents to realize that their primary concern should be their children, and that whatever happens between them, between the parents that is, should not in any way influence the children, other than the fact that both parents could always encourage the child or children to have good contact with the other parent. That prevents the whole situation of parental alienation. These parents are very unfortunate, parents who are deprived of contact with their children, and sometimes they never see their children ever again. And there have been cases that I've known where a parent has committed suicide as a result of the fact that he or she has been deprived of contact with their child. That is a more serious repercussion. The other thing that can happen through the courts is where the courts claim the child will in due course want to have contact with the absent parent, but this is not likely to happen. The longer the child has no contact with the absent parent, the more likely it is that the child will never have contact with that parent at all. Mediation can be a very successful process, providing both parents are sensible, rational, and love their children even more than they hate the absent parent. Sometimes in contact disputes, when supervised contact has been judged to be the most effective way of leading to direct contact, children will be showing a great deal of animosity towards the absent parent because they have been alienated against that parent. And also they will do this to show anger, even spit at a parent, because they feel that will please the custodial parent. And in so doing, of course, they're destroying any sort of possibility of contact with their absent parent. Now, absent parents find this extremely difficult to take, that a child who was once loved, cared for, cuddled, and given a great deal of affection and guidance can turn into that sort of animal almost. But that it must be remembered that that child is not speaking as he or she feels. He is responding to the brainwashing he or she has received from the alienator. Children learn very often, if they're used by a custodial parent to lie, they will make up stories about what they experienced with the absent parent in the past, leading to them claiming not to wish to have any contact with them.
Turning the mind of a child against the father. It's telling lies to the child about the father. It's letting the child hear negative, bad things about the father. And that child can then themselves adopt negative attitudes towards the father. And they will then perhaps grow up into adult life with that perverted view of their father. And that's something that lives with them the rest of their life. That form of emotional abuse has just as much of a long-term damaging effect upon a child as physical or sexual abuse.
They will lie to the point where they will accuse an absent parent, having been, of course, brainwashed or alienated by the custodial parent, that they have suffered physical abuse, emotional abuse, even sexual abuse. Now, it is for the absent parent to prove that this has never occurred, rather than for the child to prove that it has occurred. And some parents suffer considerably, especially fathers, having been accused of sexually abusing their child, when in fact this never happened. It is frequently investigated by the police and found to be totally untrue.
The meaning of the word violence is becoming stretched beyond any recognition. It keeps cropping up time and time again as a means of driving the father away and making him considered to be unsuitable to be a carer for the children.
The important thing, once the family breakdown occurs, is for the alienated parent to do anything they can to make contact with their child. The custodial parent will claim, I am doing everything I can to get the child to have contact with their father or mother, when in fact, deep down, the child realizes that the parent does not want them to have contact with the absent parent. Sometimes children realize as they get older what has happened to them and the alienation they have suffered by the custodial parent.
Brazil introduced a parental alienation law 18 months ago. It was beautifully simple. If either parent damaged the relationship of the child with the other parent, then there were two consequences: a fine or reversal of residence. If parents in this country knew that if they were found out damaging the child's relationship with the other parent, that the likely consequences that the child would be put to live with the other parent, they wouldn't do it.
Unfortunately, it's necessary for the parent who has been alienated, after trying a long time to make contact with his children, to get the alienating parent to see sense, and it has failed, to move on. And moving on means essentially not giving up ever wanting to have contact with that child, and making it clear to that child that you're always there for them if they want to see you and be with you. But at the same time, that parent who has been alienated has to move on. And to move on means very often marrying again and having another child or children.